I was sitting at a wedding last weekend, watching the groom and his 4 brothers stand in a line for a photo. To anyone else in the room, they were simply the Miller boys. They shared the same sharp jawline, the same restless energy, and that specific barking laugh that gets a bit too loud after a few drinks. If you were looking for a generalization, there it was. 5 iterations of the exact same blueprint, standing in descending order of height. But then the speeches started and the image began to fracture. The eldest brother spoke about the unshakable stability of their childhood home, while the middle brother made a fleeting, biting joke about the years of chaos they had to survive. One brother looked at their father with visible hero worship. Another spent the entire night positioned so there was always a table between them. They have the same DNA, the same last name, and the same childhood bedroom walls. Yet, as I watched them, it became clear that if you tried to give all 5 of them the same piece of life advice, you'd probably end up helping 2 and accidentally ruining the other 3. It is a strange, constant tension we live in. We crave these labels, the working class, the younger generation, the Miller boys, because without them, the world is just a blinding storm of individual data points we can't process. We need the blue earth view from space just to know where we are. But the moment you actually land on the surface and feel the dirt under your boots, you realize the blue was an illusion created by distance. The contradictory reality is that the closer you get to anything, the less it looks like the category it belongs to. It leaves you with a haunting question. At what distance does the truth actually live? Are we standing too far back to see the reality, or are we standing too close to see the pattern? I have to say, that description, it hits a little too close to home. I think we've all been at that exact table at a wedding. You know,
Absolutely.
You look at a family across the room and you think, okay, I get it. That's the clan. That's the vibe.
You see the monolith.
Exactly. And then you actually sit down next to them and suddenly you realize you're looking at 5 completely different strangers who just happen to share a chin structure.
It's the universal experience. You see the Miller boys from a distance and they look like clones, but then you zoom in, you hear the actual speeches, you see the body language.
And the whole thing just crumbles.
It crumbles. You realize that one of them is living in a tragedy, one's in a comedy, and one is in some kind of political thriller with their dad.
Right. And that's really what we're digging into today. Not just, family dynamics, but this weird, uncomfortable gap between the labels we slap on people and on ourselves, and the actual messy lives we lead.
It's a huge gap.
We have this stack of research for this deep dive that is honestly a bit dizzying. We've got classical sociology, we've got some pretty heavy genetics, and we've got some really poignant cultural commentary on why we're all so lonely.
It is a dizzying stack, but it all circles around one central conflict. It's this conflict between the blue earth view, the view from space where everything is smooth and categorical.
The big picture.
The big picture. And the dirt on the boots view where everything is granular and chaotic and, well, real.
So the technical term for this, if you want to get fancy right off the bat, is what?
It's the tension between biological and social determinism versus individual adaptation.
Okay, determinism versus adaptation. This sounds like a textbook.
Yeah.
Let's break that down into something we can actually chew on.
Yeah,
We're basically asking, are we just following a script?
Exactly. Are we just acting out a blueprint that was written by our genes and our society? Or are we, like the brother who made the joke about chaos while the other ones spoke of stability? Are we fracturing that image and carving out our own reality?
So is it the blueprint or is it the fracture? To understand that, I feel like we have to go back in time a bit, because the way we look at this, the way we even think about society with a capital S, it's changed a massive amount over the last few hundred years.
Oh, it's a total revolution in thought. And to understand where we are now, we have to look at where we started. If you go back to the origins of sociology, we're talking 17th, 18th, 19th century.
The big names.
The big names. Think of Thomas Hobbes, think of Emile Durkheim. They were obsessed with the Leviathan.
The Leviathan, that's the sea monster from the Bible, right? Yeah. But Hobbes used it to describe the state.
Exactly. The frontispiece of Hobbes's famous book literally shows a giant king, this huge man rising above the landscape. But if you look really, really closely at his body, his skin isn't skin.
What is it?
It's made of thousands of tiny little people.
That's creepy.
It is a little bit creepy, yeah. But the metaphor was that society is a real living thing. It's a solid fact. A monster armed with a scepter and a sword.
So in this view, you call it macro-realism in the notes.
Right.
In this view, things like the state, the church, the economy, the class system, These aren't just ideas we have.
No, they are real, tangible forces that exist independent of you or me. They stand above us, and they constrain us. They are the weather system we're all living in.
So in that worldview, if I'm a peasant, I'm just a cell in the toe of this giant.
You are a cell in the body. The body lives, the body dies, the body goes to war. The individual cell doesn't really have a say in any of it. It just functions.
It's a very top-down view.
Completely top-down. Durkheim, who is basically the father of sociology, famously argued that social facts are external to the individual and they exercise coercion over them. You don't make society, society makes you. Full stop.
Okay, so that's the blue earth view on steroids, just one big solid object. But then something happens. We get into the 20th century and people start, I guess, looking a little closer.
Right, the camera zooms in, and this is the huge shift to the micro. You get thinkers like George Simmel, Charles Cooley, George Herbert Mead, and they start asking a very dangerous question. Where is this Leviathan?
Like, literally, where is it? Can you point to it?
Yes. If you walk into a government building, do you see the state? Do you see some kind of glowing spirit of democracy hovering in the lobby?
No. I see a clerk stamping a form. Yeah. I see a security guard checking a bag. I see a lady eating a bagel in the corner.
You see people. You see specific individuals having specific interactions, and this led to a radical, almost heretical idea. What if the Leviathan doesn't exist?
What if it's just a story?
What if it's just a story we tell ourselves? What if society is, as Simmel put it, merely the name for a number of individuals connected by interaction?
This is where we get into that other term, nominalism. Now, I'll be honest, when I saw macro-realism versus micro-nominalism in the notes, my eyes glazed over a little bit.
I don't blame you.
That sounds like something you write on a chalkboard and then erase immediately. Can we put this in, regular human terms?
Yes, of course. It's academic jargon, but the concept is actually something you deal with every single day of your life. Let's use a metaphor. Think about a traffic jam.
Okay, I'm picturing the 405 freeway. Total gridlock. Misery.
Perfect. Now imagine you're in a traffic helicopter looking down. You see a traffic jam. It's a big red snake on the pavement. It moves, it grows, it shrinks. You can point at it on the map and say, there is a traffic jam.
Right. That's the realist view. The jam is a real thing.
The jam is a real object. It has emergent properties. It exists.
I can see it on Google Maps. It's a red line. It's definitely real to me when I'm late for something.
But now, land the helicopter, get out, walk up to one of those cars and knock on the window. Do you see a traffic jam?
No. I see a guy in a Ford F-150 eating a sandwich and looking extremely angry.
You see a driver, you see a car, you see a brake light. If you interview every single driver on that highway, not one of them will say they are doing a traffic jam.
No, they're just trying to get home.
They are just trying to get home. They're hitting their brakes because the person in front of them hit their brakes. So nominalism argues that the traffic jam doesn't actually exist as a thing in itself. It's just a label, a name, we invented to describe the aggregate effect of 1,000 individual people hitting their brakes at more or less the same time.
So applying that to society. Society is the traffic jam.
To the nominalists, yes. They argue we treat the economy or the state or the working class like it's a dragon living in a cave somewhere.
But there is no dragon.
There is no dragon. There's just a bunch of guys in F-150s trying to figure out where to go.
That's kind of unsettling, actually. Because if the economy isn't a real thing, why does it feel so heavy? Why can it crush me? If the state is just people, why can it put me in jail?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If society is just this liquid state of interactions, just us talking and reacting to each other, how does it solidify into something that feels like a brick wall?
Yeah. If the Leviathan is just a ghost story we tell each other, why does its sword feel so sharp?
To answer that, we have to look at the engine of reality. We have to look at how we translate these tiny micro moments into massive macro structures. And for this part of the dive, we have to bring in the work of Randall. He's a brilliant sociologist who basically tries to bridge this exact gap.
He's the one who talks about interaction ritual chains, right?
That's the one. Collins looks at the world and says, show me the structure. And he concludes that structure is nothing more than people repeatedly inhabiting the same buildings, using the same tools, and talking to the same people.
Repeatedly, that's the key word.
It is everything. But the question is, why do we repeat it? Why do we go to the office every day at 9 a.m.? Why do we listen to the person with the manager badge on their lanyard? Collins argues it comes down to two big things: our cognitive limitations and this idea of ritual.
Cognitive limitations. You mean we're just Too stupid to reinvent the world every morning.
Stupid is a harsh word, but functionally.
Yeah.
Humans cannot calculate complex contingencies constantly. If you had to negotiate your status, your safety, and your role every single time you met another human being.
Hi, I'm me. Are you you? Are you going to kill me? Do you own this chair?
Right. You'd be exhausted by breakfast. I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
I do.
So we rely on tacit assumptions. We rely on routine. But the glue that holds that routine together, the thing that makes us want to follow the routine, is what Collins calls interaction rituals.
He compares a simple conversation to a religious rite, doesn't he? Which seems a bit dramatic.
It does seem dramatic, but his argument is pretty compelling. He argues that when two people are talking, it's not really about the information they are trading. It's not about whether what you're saying is true or false.
So what's it about?
It's about mutual focus.
Yeah.
When we talk, we are creating a little myth of group membership. We are saying, for this moment, you and I are in a shared reality. If the ritual works, if we get into a rhythm, if we nod at the right times, if we laugh at the same jokes,
we feel a connection.
We feel a connection, and we generate something he calls emotional energy, or EE.
Emotional energy. Okay, that's the term that sounds a bit woo-woo. Is that just like vibes?
In a way, yes. You can think of it as vibes, but Colin treats it like a hard economic currency. Think about it this way. This actually explains why I'm so exhausted after Thanksgiving dinner.
Okay, I want to hear this.
Well, technically at Thanksgiving, you're socializing. You're with your family. You're eating good food. It should be energizing.
It should be a high event.
It should be. But so often, the rhythm is off. Uncle Jerry is talking over everyone about politics. Your cousin is just scrolling on her phone under the table. The mutual focus is completely broken. The ritual isn't clicking.
But I leave feeling drained, like physically heavy. I just want to go lie in a dark room for 4 hours.
That is a loss of emotional energy. And Collins would say that's not just a mood, that is the fundamental mechanism that breaks down social bonds. If you lose enough energy from those interactions year after year, you eventually stop going to Thanksgiving.
And the family structure dissolves.
Exactly. Not because of I put up a fence, I mow the lawn, I act like the owner. You, in turn, act like the non-owner. And we both tacitly believe that if you break that ritual, a third group, the police will come and perform a violence ritual on you.
A violence ritual. That's a strong phrase.
But think about it. The authority of the police relies on everyone in that scene agreeing to play their part in the ritual. The officer puts on the uniform. That's a costume for the ritual. He uses specific formal language. He carries the badge. That's the totem.
Right.
If he walked up to you in board shorts and a tank top and tried to arrest you, the ritual would fail. You wouldn't feel the weight of the state. You just see a guy in board shorts having a weird day.
That makes the whole world feel incredibly fragile. Like if we all just woke up tomorrow and decided to stop performing the ritual, the entire structure would just vanish.
And historically, that's exactly what happens when a regime falls or there's a run on a bank or a public figure's reputation collapses overnight. It's usually because the flow of emotional energy shifted.
The leader lost the room.
The leader lost the room. The ritual failed. The myth of their authority dissolved because the micro-interactions on the ground stopped supporting it. The Leviathan starved to death because the cells stopped feeding it their energy.
Okay, so that's how we build the structure up. We use these rituals to create a shared reality, a blue earth, that we can all agree on so we don't have to fight over every single chair. But here's where it gets really interesting, or maybe really depressing. What happens when the structure we built stops feeding us that energy? What happens when the rituals become empty?
This is where we have to pivot to the Crisis of Atomization. We have a really compelling source here from an essay by Willow Liana that touches on this deep sense of modern malaise. She calls it the lonely generation, but she makes a very specific and I think important distinction.
Right. She says it's not just loneliness. Loneliness is a feeling. Atomization is something else entirely.
Loneliness is an emotion. You can feel lonely in a crowded room, as the saying goes. Atomization is a structural reality. It's a term from chemistry.
Right. Breaking a molecule down.
Breaking a molecule down into its constituent atoms. In a social sense, it means the bonds themselves have been dissolved. The larger units, families, neighborhoods, churches, bowling leagues, have been broken down into single, free-floating individuals.
And her argument is that we've lost the social technology to handle being that close to people anymore.
Exactly. She argues that because we've become so atomized, we lack the capacity to withstand close contact and the constraints that it inevitably brings. We've become so hyper-individualized, so focused on our specific point-level reality that we can't mesh with others anymore. We've lost the knack for it.
She talks about the patches we try to apply to this problem. We feel this atomization, so we try to fix it. We go to therapy. We join these, co-living houses. We swipe on apps trying to find the perfect partner who will solve everything.
But she argues those are failing, because they are trying to solve a structural, societal problem with purely individual solutions. A co-living house often fails because it's just a collection of atoms bouncing off each other in a hallway. There's no generational continuity. There's no shared ritual that binds them.
It's just shared rent.
It's just shared rent. There's no EE.
There was one image she used that really, really stuck with me. The locking spine.
Oh, the coffee shop. That was so evocative.
Yeah. She describes the modern coffee shop. It used to be a place of noise, of friction, of community, a third place. Now, you walk into most of them and it's like a library of silence.
Everyone is hunched over a laptop, just glowing blue screens, headphones on, total isolation pods.
The locking spine. We are physically present in the same room, but we're socially completely absent. We're affixed to the digital realm. It's like the coffee shop is just a fueling station for individual workers who are actually living inside the internet.
And this brings up the really thorny question of freedom, because let's be honest, we chose this on some level.
That's what I wanted to push back on. Because when I hear people romanticizing the village or the tight-knit community, I get a little skeptical. The village wasn't exactly paradise for everyone.
What do you mean?
I mean, sure, you had community, but you also had incredibly nosy neighbors. You had rigid gender roles. You had crushing social pressure. If you were different in any way, like imagine our woodworker friend Minjoon from the case study, in a rigid, traditional village, they would crush you. Being an atom means I can move to a big city, be who I want, dye my hair pink, and nobody cares. That sounds like a win.
And that is the seductive power of what Liana calls freedom of license. You are absolutely right. It feels like a win because the negative constraints are gone. We've optimized our entire society for freedom from judgment.
But you can hear a but coming.
But the argument here isn't that the village was perfect. It's that we overcorrected. Liana argues we traded freedom of the spirit, which is the old Greek idea of self-mastery within a community, for freedom of license, which is just the absence of constraints. The deep irony is that freedom from one another leads to less control over our actual circumstances.
Freedom from one another leads to less control. Yeah, that seems contradictory.
Well, when you're an atom, you're incredibly vulnerable. If you get sick, if you lose your job, if you have a crisis, who catches you? If you have no nosy neighbors, you also have no helpful neighbors. You have to pay for everything. You have to buy care. You have to buy entertainment. You have to buy safety. You have no buffer against the storm of life. You're on your own.
That connects directly to the story she tells about the coal mining town. The idea of placelessness.
Yes. The woman who leaves the dying town for the city gives her a job, maybe, but the city doesn't care about her. She tries to go back home, but the home is gone. The jobs are gone. The community is gone. The church is boarded up. She is, in a very real sense, placeless.
That's the great omission she talks about. We designed our entire society for individuals, for careers, for mobility, for economic efficiency. We built a world for atoms. But we forgot that atoms are fundamentally unstable on their own. We need the soil. We need the dirt on the boots to feel grounded.
So what's the fix? Because she's pretty critical of the standard advice. She doesn't just say go to therapy or practice mindfulness.
No, her solution is much harder. She suggests a founder's mindset for community, which sounds like a lot of work.
It is work. That's the point. In the past, community was inherited. You were born into the Miller family or the coal town or the parish, and that was it. You didn't have to build it. You just had to survive it.
Right.
Now, you have to build it from scratch. You have to be the one to host the dinner parties. You have to persist through the awkwardness and the scheduling conflicts. You have to be the one to create the ritual.
That connects right back to Collins and the emotional energy. In the old world, the rituals were provided for you. Church on Sunday, town meetings, holidays, they were just there. Now you have to be the generator. You can't just wait to consume the emotional energy. You have to manufacture it.
And that requires a massive shift in how we see our own agency in the world. Which brings us to the next layer of this puzzle. We've talked about the sociological structure, the rituals, the atomization, but what about the biology? What about the psychology? Are we just helpless victims of this atomization, or do we have a say in the matter?
This is where we get into the push and pull. We have some heavy science here on reciprocal determinism from Albert Bandura.
Bandura is so crucial because he breaks the binary. Usually people think in one of two ways. Either I control everything, which is pure free will, or the environment controls me, which is pure determinism. Bandura comes along and says, no, it's a triangle.
A triangle. Okay, walk me through the 3 points.
Point 1, personal factors. This is your internal world. Your biology, your thoughts, your mood, your beliefs about your own abilities, what he calls self-efficacy.
Okay, that's me inside my head.
Right. Point 2, environment, the room you're in, the society you live in, the people around you, the temperature, the external world.
Got it.
Point 3, behavior, what you actually do, the observable actions you take.
And the idea is that they all hit each other constantly.
Constantly. It's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street between all 3 points all the time. Take the school child example from the source material. This is a classic illustration.
Okay, so we have a kid who hates school.
Right. Let's start with a personal factor. The thought, I hate school. Maybe he struggles with reading, so he feels incompetent. That's all internal.
Okay, so that internal feeling leads to behavior.
Exactly. He acts out, he disrupts the class, he throws a pencil across the room.
Which then directly impacts the environment.
The teachers punish him, the other kids reject him. The classroom itself becomes a hostile, threatening place for him.
Which then feeds back and reinforces the personal factor. See? I was right. School's a prison. Everyone here hates me.
You've got it. And then the behavior gets worse. The environment gets even stricter. It's a vicious feedback loop. The child is actively creating the environment that is oppressing him, and the environment is shaping the child that is disrupting it. It's a continuous battle on all 3 levels.
But this also implies we can break the loop, right? If it's a two-way street, I can push back. If I change my behavior, if the kid decides to raise his hand instead of throwing the pencil, he starts to change the environment. Theoretically,
yes. Bandura calls this human agency. We aren't just puppets of our environment or our biology. We can pull our own strings. But,
okay.
and this is a huge but, we also have to deal with the hard limits, the biological limits.
This is where we get to the really uncomfortable stuff, the MAOA gene.
Right. We have a source here from R.S. Morrison on biological limits on autonomy. And this touches on something that makes a lot of people squirm.
The media calls this the warrior gene, right? Which sounds cool, like you're a Spartan or something.
It does sound cool, but scientists really roll their eyes at that term. It's a massive, massive oversimplification. But the study that's always mentioned is fascinating, and it explains this interaction perfectly.
So break it down for us. What does this gene actually do?
So MAOA is an enzyme that breaks down certain neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine after they've done their job. If you have the low activity version of this gene, your brain is essentially a little slower at scrubbing out these chemicals, some of which are linked to aggression.
Okay, so if I have that gene, I'm a violent person, I'm just a ticking time bomb waiting to go off.
No, and that is the absolute key finding of the research. If you have the low MAOA gene, but you had a loving, safe, stable childhood, you're fine. You are statistically no more likely to be violent than anyone else.
Really? So the gene does nothing on its own?
Pretty much nothing. You could say it's a loaded gun, but nobody's pulling the trigger. However, if you have that gene and you suffered severe childhood abuse,
what happens then?
The risk of committing violent crime as an adult doesn't just double or triple, it goes up 9-fold.
9 times.
9 times higher.
Wow. So it's not nature versus nurture at all.
No.
It's nature times nurture.
That's the perfect way to put it. It's a chemical reaction. The gene loads the gun, the environment pulls the trigger. Neither does much on its own, but together the effect is explosive.
So where is the autonomy in that? Terrifying. If I happen to have that gene and I had that horrible childhood, am I just a robot executing a program? Where's the freedom to choose not to be violent?
That is the darkest question in this whole discussion.
Yeah.
But Morrison introduces a concept that I find absolutely brilliant and kind of counterintuitive. He calls it the Morrison paradox.
Okay.
He argues that the individual becomes more autonomous as the number of determinants of their behavior increases.
Wait, that sounds completely backward. If there are more things controlling me, my genes, my childhood, my culture, my economy, aren't I less free?
Okay. Imagine you're a very simple organism. An amoeba. You have 1, maybe 2 determinants. Temperature, light. Is it hot? Move away. Is it cold? Move closer. You are a complete slave to temperature. Very few determinants, 0 freedom.
Okay, I'm an amoeba. I have no choice. I'm just a little thermometer.
Now, look at a human being. You have genetic determinants pushing you one way. You have cultural determinants pushing you another. You have your grandmother's advice in your head. You have the book you read last week. You have the weather. You have the state of your bank account. You have 1,000 different arrows pointing at you from all directions.
And they often point in very different directions.
Exactly. My genes say, that person insulted you. Punch him. My culture says, be polite, smile. My grandmother's voice says, turn the other cheek. My bank account says, you really can't afford bail this month.
The bank account usually wins that fight.
Often. But the point is, when the determinants conflict with each other, that is where the space for choice opens up. If all the arrows pointed in the exact same direction, you'd be a robot. But because they're fighting each other, you, the conscious self, have to step in and act as the tiebreaker. The complexity of the constraints is what creates the gap where the self resides. We have to see people as both free to choose and determined by a whole host of factors all at once.
That is actually really hopeful. The chaos of the Miller boys at the wedding.
Yeah.
One wanting stability, one seeing chaos, one hero worshiping, one avoiding. Maybe that's not a failure of the blueprint. Maybe that's the evidence of their humanity.
I think so.
The blueprint was just the starting line. The conflict between all the determinants is where they became actual individual people.
Precisely. And this leads us to the final and perhaps most poignant part of our deep dive today. We've looked at the theory, the mechanisms, the atomization, the biology, but how does this actually look on the ground? How do we live this tension between the Blue Earth generalization and the point-level reality every day?
We have 3 case studies here from a source that calls itself the theory of generalization. And I love the analogy they use to set this whole thing up. The hand.
It's a perfect rebuttal to the idea that sameness implies identical outcomes. It's so simple and so powerful.
Yeah. Look at your own hand. 5 fingers, same blood supply, same DNA, same owner. But you can't replace the thumb with the pinky and expect it to work.
Shared origin does not mean shared destiny.
Exactly. The root sets the constraints.
Yeah.
You're a finger, you're not going to sprout wings and fly away.
Yeah.
But the uniqueness operates inside those boundaries.
I love that.
So let's look at case study number 1. Minjin in Seoul.
This is such a classic example of this tension between the macro label and the micro reality.
So from the macro view, from space, Minjin is a success story. He's a statistical success. He's the son of a surgeon. He lives in a high-pressure, high-achievement society. He's likely on track for a prestigious career himself. He is a healthy cell in the high-functioning organ of the South Korean economy.
That's the Blue Earth view. It looks efficient, it looks organized, it looks blue. But now, let's zoom in, let's land on the surface. What is the dirt on his boots?
The dirt is cedar shaving.
Yes.
Minjin is a slight variation. He has unique nerve endings. We talked about rituals and emotional energy earlier. His high E ritual isn't in the operating room. It's in the wood shop. The hospital smells sterile and cold to him. The wood smells like life.
This is the theme of psychological sovereignty. The macro view says he is a doctor in training. The micro view says he is an artisan in hiding. The entire tension of his life is the distance between those 2 points. If you treat him only as the category, if you just treat him as the next generation of doctors, you crush him. You force the pinky to be a thumb.
And then we have case study 2, Elias in the Rust Belt of Ohio. And this one hits hard because the labels are so politicized today.
Absolutely. If you watch the news, you know exactly who Elias is supposed to be. There's a pre-written script for him.
Right. The macro view. White working class, disenfranchised voter, victim of post-industrial decline. We're told to see his town as a graveyard. We see Elias as a ghost haunting the ruins of a factory. The narrative is pure tragedy and loss.
That's the narrative we impose from a distance to make sense of the economic data. It's the traffic jam view. Oh, look at that red line of decline. But let's look at the micro view. What is Elias actually doing with his day?
He's restoring old clocks. He's a craftsman. He's meticulous, detailed, patient. He sees his town not as a graveyard, but as a forest in winter.
Bare branches, for sure. But the roots are still there, intertwined.
Exactly. He sees the potential for spring. He sees the value in what's left, not just what's gone.
This is the theme of individual adaptation. Elias isn't waiting for the macroeconomy, for the Leviathan to come back and save him. He isn't waiting for the factory to reopen. He found sovereignty in his own hands. He found a way to be autonomous within the very real constraints of his environment.
It just changes how you see the Rust Belt, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It stops being this monolithic tragedy and starts being a place where people are actually living their lives.
It stops being a what and starts being a who. That is the power of the dirt on the boots perspective. It gives people their dignity back from the generalization.
And finally, case study 3.
Yeah.
This one really got to me. Mr. Kojima in Tokyo.
The Kodokushi cleaner.
For those listening who don't know, Kodokushi is a Japanese term for lonely deaths. It refers to people often elderly, who die alone in their apartments and aren't discovered for days or even weeks. Mr. Kojima is the man who cleans up afterward.
From a macro perspective, this is the ultimate failure of a society. This is the endpoint of the atomization we were just talking about. These are the people who fell completely through the cracks, the lonely atoms. It paints a picture of a cold, unfeeling city where people just cease to exist and no one notices.
But then you hear Mr. Kojima talk about his work. He enters these rooms that must smell of death and abandonment, and he doesn't see emptiness. He sees connection.
He sees the carefully folded tea bags. He sees the books from halfway across the world on a shelf. He sees the dust that connected their lungs to the city air that everyone else breathes. He notices that they kept a calendar. He notices the traces of humanity.
Loneliness is a failure of scale. That line just has been echoing in my head.
It's so profound. We are interdependent, whether we acknowledge it or not. Even in total isolation, we are interacting with the world through objects, through ideas, through the physical space we occupy. Mr. Kojima is reframing the whole narrative. He isn't just cleaning up trash. He is witnessing the micro-evidence of a life that mattered, even if the macro society forgot about it.
It's the interdependence theme. We are never as separate as the generalizations make us seem. Even in our most atomized moments, we are still part of the fabric.
The generalization is a tool. It's useful. We need to know where Tokyo is on the map. We need to know the statistics on elderly care to make policy. But we cannot live on the map. We have to live in the territory.
So, to bring this all back home, we started with the Miller boys at the wedding. The blueprint versus the fracture. We've gone through the history of sociology, the traffic jams, the awkward Thanksgiving dinners, the warrior genes, and these incredibly specific lives.
And the synthesis is this. The map and the territory are both real. They just operate at different resolutions.
The blue Earth is real.
From space, the Earth is blue. That is a truth. If you're an alien trying to land your spaceship, that information is vital. But from the ground, the Earth is brown and green and gray and wet. That is also a truth.
The mistake is thinking we have to choose between them.
The mistake is believing one view cancels the other out. The mistake is thinking that because Minjin is a statistic, he can't also be a woodworker. Or because Elias is part of a voter demographic, he can't also be a masterful clock restorer. Or because you have the MAOA gene, you can't also be a gentle person.
So philosophy, and really just being a thoughtful human being, is about deciding how close to stand to things.
You have to learn to adjust your focal length.
If you stand too far back.
Everything looks the same. It's vague. It's the Miller boys. It's the working class. You miss the humanity. You miss the beautiful, messy fracture.
And if you stand too close,
nothing relates. It's just noise. It's just a blinding storm of individual data points. You miss the pattern. You miss the fact that the Miller boys do share a jawline and a history. You miss the fact that we were all, in some way, part of the same human struggle.
So we have to keep moving. We have to be able to zoom in and then zoom back out. We have to be able to see the Leviathan, but also remember to shake hands with the clerk.
We have to recognize the blueprint and at the same time cherish the fracture. That is where the truth actually lives, in the movement between the two.
It reminds me of that final thought from our source material, something to kind of carry with us as we go back to our own macro lives and our own micro moments.
Nothing is truly the same when examined closely. Everything is almost the same when examined broadly. Sometimes the evening feels the same every day. It never actually is.